Eyes on Books. Today we're talking about the First Ladies, a wonderful book. It's a fiction book, but it's really based on a lot of facts from two First Ladies. You had the First Lady of Struggle, Mary Bethune, and the First Lady of the United States, Eleanor Roosevelt. And let's talk to the authors. How did you two, as established authors, want to get together and write about history?
Well, if you're asking about how we got together to write The First Ladies, it's a story that actually begins with our first collaboration, which was called The Personal Librarian.
Hmm.
It's the story of Belle DeCosta Green, the private librarian to the famous financier and industrialist J.P. Morgan, and how together they created one of the world's best collections of rare and priceless manuscripts. We came together to write that book, and it all started way back when I was a commercial litigator in New York City, and I would visit a lot of the cultural institutions in New York as I thought about turning my hand to writing historical fiction. And I learned about Belle for the first time there. And she seemed like such a remarkable woman, a woman who became one of the most powerful people in the art world at a time when women didn't have the right to vote. It wasn't until over a decade later that we learned that Belle had another remarkable aspect to her, and that was a secret. She was only able to have the role that she did with JP Morgan by hiding her true identity. She was a Black woman passing as white in an era of segregation and Jim Crow. And it was at that point that I knew that Belle DeCosta Green deserved to have her story told by a Black woman as well. And I happened to be reading one of Victoria's books, the tremendous Stand Your Ground, right around that time. And I reached out through our agents to see if she would be interested.
Oh, and so I received a synopsis from Marie at that time. And the first thing I did was Google Marie because we did not know each other. I think it's important for people to know that when Marie and I started together, we didn't know each other, which makes this all so much more phenomenal. And I Googled her and I wondered why she wanted to write a book with me because I was writing contemporary fiction and Marie was writing historical fiction. So I couldn't figure out why she would want to write a book with me. But I finally started reading a proposal. It took me a few months to actually read the whole thing because the beginning of it was about JP Morgan and I wasn't interested in doing anything with the JP Morgan. But when I finally read the entire synopsis, I couldn't wait to call Marie and for us to start working together. And I always tell people, I said hello, Marie said hello. And that was in 2019, I think. And the rest is history. We have been writing together ever since.
Well, that's wonderful. Because I never knew anything about Mary McLeod Bethune. It wasn't taught in school when I went to school, and it opened up a whole new pathway for me. I was very curious to know, after reading the book for a while, if she belonged to so many organizations, if she hadn't have met Sarah Roosevelt and hooked up with Eleanor Roosevelt, do you think she would have been as powerful and famous as she was?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, she was still a force in her own way. You had never heard anything about her, but I was about 8 years old when I heard about her. I've known about Mary McLeod Bethune. She was the first person in my mind as a little girl that I learned I understood famous and infamous. Like she had already passed away, And she owned a college. She founded a college. So I kind of figured one day I could grow up and I could have my own college too.
Right.
So there were many things that she did outside of her friendship with Eleanor Roosevelt. By the time Mary and Eleanor met, Mary had already founded, well, she hadn't founded, but she was part of the National Organization of Colored Women. She had already had the college. She had already been very instrumental in Black people registering to vote and to vote with the Republican Party. So she was strong and famous in her own right. When the two women came together, they became another force. Wouldn't you agree, Marie?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say that Mary McLeod Bethune was one of the most famous Black individuals during her lifetime. And in fact, I don't think during her lifetime that her friendship and collaboration with Eleanor Roosevelt garnered her that much more fame, because, you know, it wasn't their relationship, even though Mary and Eleanor made an effort to have people know about their friendship, to have the press see them together, it wasn't as widely reported on by the mainstream media because people at the time were not wanting to see a Black and a white woman, you know, bonded together in friendship.
Did it take a lot of research for you because of the fact that Mary Bethune was not reported in the mainstream press? Did it take you as writers a lot of research to bring out the real story?
All of it takes a lot of research, but it was well reported in the Black press. Mm-hmm. And so the Pittsburgh Courier, which was a major newspaper, the Chicago Defender, the Houston Defender, which is still around. So yes, we had to dig for it like we dig for everything with all of the books that we write. And so it wasn't reported in the New York Times or in the Herald Tribune or those papers, but we were able to find evidence of their friendship together. And in fact, recently we did a book signing with Eleanor Roosevelt's granddaughter, who not only told us all of this, but she told us that we did it well.
I was just, I mean, did you, when you wrote each, it's a great book, and I was intrigued on many levels. And it's important that the reader looks at the date of the beginning of each chapter to get a reference. Did you each write each character?
We start out the story together, brainstorming, outlining, focusing in on sort of the themes we want to tease out, the narrative arc. And a lot of that initial research is done together. And then with Personal Librarian, of course, there's only one voice, one character. So we did that together. With this story, we each decided to take one of the characters, but it's would be misleading to say that we each just wrote that character, because we would write a chapter, we would outline 5 chapters, 6 chapters, write initial drafts, and then we switch them with each other, edit. The other one edits it, make sure it's seamless with the preceding and following chapters. So it's very much a collaborative process. But definitely, I would say each of us took the first draft of a character and of those chapters.
And then
Yes.
I kept going back to, so does the protagonist then change each chapter depending upon if it's Mary or Eleanor?
Yes. So the book has 2 protagonists.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now the book is called fiction. I'm just curious, as a novice writer, is there a literary formula then when it becomes nonfiction into fiction? Because I mean, there's so much of the book you learn from it, like it's nonfiction.
So, I mean, we write historical fiction, right? And it's fiction that's very much grounded in the historical record and the research. The best way I've ever found to describe it is this. So we do extensive research. That research becomes the architecture of the story. It becomes the foundation, the pillars, the roof, and it's in those areas where we don't have the answers from the record that we extrapolate, make logical extrapolations from the research and the characters as we've developed them to fill in the rest of the story. So it's very much anchored in the record. It is fiction. These are our versions of these women and of these accounts, but we are very much inspired by the record.
The conversation is basically your idea of what went on during that meeting or that time frame when the two of them were together, that the stuff that was not documented.
Yes,
Okay, that's
because we
a good
don't
way to put
have
it.
any recordings of what they said, but
Right.
we know that that first meeting at the beginning of the book, we know that happened.
Right.
And so just by extrapolating who we know, we study, I don't want to call them characters because they're real people, but we study our characters first.
Right.
And so when we're writing dialogue, we try to put in exactly what we think they said. These are not words that we want to say. This is what we believe they would have said in that situation.
You created one character. It was the press secretary. Is it Steve Woodburn? Was that a character created?
Inspired by several characters.
Yes, that's the best way to put it. He's inspired by several people who worked for FDR.
Of the viewpoint of the Southern Democrats, which was a unique faction in political history at that time, and played very much a role in the way that the FDR presidency and the decision making unfolded.
It's just how ugly politics can be. I mean, everything that Eleanor and Mary tried to get across, politics would rear its ugly head. And Mary too, when she wanted to protest the march, politics got in the way of that. Is that something that you actually saw within your research? There was just so much of what that story is.
It's on our research, and it's what's still happening today.
Yes.
When people have to make decisions, political decisions, they are political decisions. It doesn't always have to do with what they truly believe or what they want to do. For example, FDR really did, I believe, want to do something about lynching, but how he couldn't make the decision himself because that's not the way our government works.
Right.
It's a collaboration. We have a collaborative government, and only Congress can make laws. Only the House of Representatives can make laws. So he was stuck with that, and so you have to push, and you have to play. It's a game of chess. You have to move around the pieces, and it's all political, and it's no different than what's going on today. That's just the way this government was set up.
Cory Booker till 2022 to even get the lynching law passed through. So you can imagine how many years is that it took to have something so inhumane happen, and nobody stepped up to the plate to do it until 2022. So it's a slow process, and I think in a lot of ways this book shows how things that needed to be done were tucked away so other things could go forth, especially with his New Deal. He had to pass things in that New Deal to help the economy and the people get back on their feet.
I found it frustrating, and just looking at it. But you said like the civil rights, a lot of it is still hanging around today.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw this book on many different levels. It was a civil rights battle, and learning about Mary Bethune. I never really knew anything about her. And I've mentioned it to some black friends, and as you said, it's a lot of them knew about her. So to me, it was a great learning experience and a tremendous book. And also Eleanor Roosevelt's battles with her husband. How did she even survive that time? I mean, she really didn't. I guess they became estranged.
Yeah, well, she existed, but the thing is, I think in your book, it almost shows how Mary pulled Eleanor up and brought her more into the limelight and made her a little more of a how can animated character than her life was. She was very content doing her little activism, but I think Mary brought her out more. That's the way I look at it.
Mary did. I think these women were both powerhouses in their own course, by themselves. And whether they had met each other or not, they were going to be they were powerful women. I think, remember, Mary was a little bit older than Eleanor.
Right.
And so I think Mary showed Eleanor some possibilities. But at the same time, Eleanor showed Mary some possibilities. And together they discovered all that was possible. But I think they were both already set in who they were going to be. And it was more than 1 + 1 = 11. With the two of them, they were just an amazing force together.
How long did it take you to write this book?
It's really hard to put a finger on how long a book takes, because sometimes, before you actually start the process of writing, the idea is germinating. You're researching the idea, you're thinking about the idea, you're playing around with the idea as to whether or not this is the right next step. And for us, we were very determined after The Personal Librarian to choose a subject for our next book that would allow us to address something that seemed to really resonate with our readers. When Victoria and I were finally able to go out after COVID and do a lot of events, time and time again, readers seemed to be as fascinated well, this is true of Personal Librarian. People seem to be as fascinated by our relationship as a Black and a white woman talking about and writing about race as they were about, say, Belle DeCosta Green. And so we wanted to pick for this book, for the First Ladies, we wanted to pick characters that would allow us to explore that and would allow our readers to explore that. So, when you think about when did the book start, the book started in some ways before we even definitively decided on Mary and Eleanor, because we were very interested in on really exploring very specific issues and very specific characters. And once we did find Mary and Eleanor and start to research them and then start the process of writing and editing, all of that, I would say in this case, took well over a year and a half, if not longer.
In your brainstorming sessions for the First Ladies, did you come up with some ideas for some more books?
Oh, of course. Many, many.
Yeah, we have several ideas.
Yeah.
That are in the works now?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, good. We'll look forward to seeing them. I know I'll be enjoying them.
Thank you.
I just enjoyed the book, and I felt that I didn't realize how much Roosevelt, FDR, depended on his mother. She was a woman of real power and real force, and when she said, do it, he goes, yes, mama, and he did it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That really surprised me,
Yeah, we always like to say that it wasn't just Eleanor and Franklin, FDR in that marriage. There was his mother. And then later there was the social secretary. So it was a very crowded space. And those probably weren't the only players. So it made for a very difficult time for Eleanor ultimately.
Right.
And while they stayed together all those years, and his mother-in-law was a force for really almost that entire time, their marriage changed dramatically from the beginning until the end. It became more, in Eleanor's case, sort of a hopeful love affair to really a political partnership towards the end.
Yeah, and I think Mary was kind of like a savior for her in a lot of ways. I really do. Well, that's what I got out of the book, because she would do her teaching. She would teach. She raised her children, but she could talk to Roosevelt, and he just tuned her out. He didn't. He did. Half the time he tuned her out, and she requested things, and he didn't do it. I mean, Mary came along, and he saw how intelligent Mary was and the drive that Mary had, and then all of a sudden, he listened to Mary, he listened to his mother, and Eleanor still came last.
Was it true that that Mary and Eleanor were trying to push their ideas even as the war was breaking out? or was that just part of just something that came up in the book to create tension? Because I just found that a little bit uneasy. He says, why are you pushing this when the war is coming on? Did that actually happen?
I think they continued to advocate for equality, even as the war came into focus. America was so late to enter the war compared to a lot of the European and powers that people knew it was coming, but it wasn't actually happening yet. And I think they were advocating for equality throughout that time period, as well as after once the war actually commenced. And they weren't just advocating for equality; they were advocating for equality within World War II as well. They
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that
True.
both Black and white people had the opportunity to fight equally, the opportunity to contribute to the war effort if they chose, as well as a whole bunch of other things that they were interested in doing. I mean, just because a country's at war doesn't mean a country doesn't have to continue running
Yeah.
and running equitably. So those two things do have to continue on the same track.
In fact, I felt the war made it very important because you were asking Black men. Well, first, you weren't allowing Black men to go fight
Right. That's
when
right.
we needed every able body to protect this country. But once you agreed to Black men fighting, you wanted them to go fight for equality someplace else and not give them equality here in their own home.
Mhm.
So I think in fact, not only do I think their efforts at that time became more important, but what they accomplished at that time set the basis for the entire civil rights movement to me. And probably Maria and I have talked about it. So what they did during that period is some of the stuff that we stand on today. It became so important during that time.
Right.
Who do you think your primary, when you set out to write this book, was your primary reader? I mean, you can put it in a lot of different demographics, but when you were writing the book, who were you writing it to?
Everybody.
Yeah, I've written over 30 novels and I never think about who I'm writing it to. I think
Really?
about the story, and I believe, maybe rightfully or wrongfully, that kind of everybody would want to read it. Our readers are probably, I would have said a long time ago, our readers are primarily women, but I think with historical fiction and with these last couple of books we've written, we have a lot of men come out to see us as well. So I would say our demographics are just about everybody: Black women, white women, 25 years old to my 91-year-old aunt loves reading the books. Marie, I don't know. You and I've never talked about who you.
I would agree with you. I mean, I would hope that not just because we want book sales, but because we want people to, these books give some of these women a second chance to have their stories be told, a second chance for us to recognize the breadth of their contributions to our societies. So when we set out to write these books, I think the goal is that everybody would read them, because these women deserve to have everybody know their stories. And the reason we've chosen these particular women, whether you know them or not, you don't know, the entirety of their lives or this particular aspect of their lives, I would certainly hope that they would appeal to a wide range of people, and that those people would then have the chance to really celebrate these women and see the breadth of their legacy in our world today.
I was just thinking that when I was finishing the book, and I was knowing our audience here is we're a 55 plus retirement community. I was just curious of what did you pinpoint, but your answer does make sense. I mean, it's an excellent book for just learning about that time period and all the crappy politics which still goes on today, actually.
Yeah. But the thing is that also, like, I didn't know anything about Mary, and I'm an activist. So I mean, how come it isn't taught in school? Or the Tuskegee Airmen, how they trained them but wouldn't let them fly for a while. I mean,
Right.
Even though they recruited the Black man into the service, they didn't want them there. And we have to open our eyes to the situation. We're all one people. And we all have the same color blood. Doesn't matter what the outside is, and we have to learn about different parts of history that have been hidden from us, and we can't destroy the history that's been there.
The name of the book is First Ladies, and Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray, we thank you very much for joining us here this morning on Eyes on Books.
And it was a wonderful.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
It was wonderful, and I hope our audience gets a chance to get the book. I highly recommend it.
It'll be in the library.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Well, I want to thank both Mary and Victoria for spending time with us. It's a wonderful book. I hope you get a chance to read it. The First Ladies is a very interesting historical fiction book, and it'll open your eyes to a lot of the situations that were going on in the 1920s through 37. So get a chance, stop in at the library, pick up a copy, pick it up on Kindle, but get a good read with this book. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you.